Hey everybody, this is Mr. Z Survival back again. I just want to do a quick video on reloading. Obviously anybody who's prepping for the zombie invasion, or if you're planning to survive when it comes down, eventually you're going to run into reloading, or you're going to be shooting arrows at zombies, which is not a bad thing. We're just going to run down really quick what it takes to reload. This is a spent 40 caliber casing. You can see there's a primer still in there and everything. This particular press is a Lee, I think it's a Lee 1000 Progressive. I got it as part of a kit. I have a measured charge, and I have a primer ready to go in the little cup. So, very simply, we'll start out in the first stage. This stage is a sizing and decapping die, meaning what that does, if we look at our shell, you can see that it's not perfectly proportioned. It's a little larger at the bottom. In one stroke, this will fix all of that. The die is made out of carbide. Because of that, I do not need any type of lubricant to do this. And steel dies, you do. Primer falls beautifully into the little drawer that I've got set up. You can see my primer is gone. If you want to get fancy, you can clean that out, but it really is not that big of a deal for what we're doing now. On the downstroke, our primer will be inserted. And you can see we have a new primer, and the shell is pretty well sized. This next die, what this does, it flares the casing out three-dimensionally on the outside. We'll see what that means in a minute. Also, this is a powder-through die. So in one step, casing gets flared and prepared for bullet seating, and we get to charge powder into the case. I'm currently using 7.5 grains of IMR 800X high score, which is kind of a dirty powder, and not as, according to the manual I have, it actually gives me less feet per second than I would like, but it works fine. And it's kind of the only option I had. Now, this next die is a bullet seating die, and I believe it also fixes the flare in the case. The only reason why we have a flare on the case, you can see it's a little flare, is so that we can seat the bullet in comfortably. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. In fact, let me pull a random casing out to demonstrate why it's a good idea to flare. You can see the bullet just will barely sit on there, and you can't really do much with it before it's flared. This takes a long time to set up. I actually have a bunch of mistakes that I'd like to show you guys in a minute. Anyway, once properly set up, what that has done has seat our bullet into the casing, into the charge casing, and it looks pretty perfect. It's actually kind of crazy consistency. This fourth one technically is optional, but for safety and for accuracy, you should always use this. This is called a crimping die, and what that will do, it's actually technically called the Lee factory crimp die, and what that will do is produce an extremely, in my case, hard to determine crimp on the bullet. One example of, maybe I can demonstrate what this is doing. These are some over crimps I have, and you can see that's ridiculously crimped. That's what this thing is doing. It is, yeah, it is crimping the case so that you have a better hold on the bullet. Now, obviously, this one's not going anywhere. I don't actually know if those are safe to use in my gun, but anyway, we have a completed casing. And believe it or not, this took several years for me to get this to this point. And also, once I got everything I needed, it took several hours. It's actually really, really hard to set up. These two, you don't need anything. You screw them in, they work. This guy, the bullet seating die, it did fine after I fixed it. It was doing this before I set it up properly, because I lost my instructions years ago. I don't remember what the hell anything is, but it actually squashed the casing and bent it a little bit. This is maybe a worse example. And some of these, as you can see, that's actually loaded. That's, you know, potentially could fire. This one, I was just, once I'd figured out what I was doing, I got this guy. I started testing it out. It takes a little bit, it's a little feel, but easy to set up. The crimper took me again several tries, as you could see from the over-crimp bullets, to deal with that a little bit. You don't have to necessarily set it up like that. You can just get it in there tight and kind of feel your way around. I preferred to get it to a point where I could just feel it. And the scale is another thing that it looks, you know, easy to deal with, but it's really not. It took in my case about an hour to get it set up. What I did, I'll take this apart real quick. This is the Lee, what are they called, precision safety scale, and essentially if you've been weighed by a doctor from the 30s, they use something really similar, and essentially it's balanced to the point where only a certain amount of weight will cause it to weigh out properly. This part is in tens of grains, so if I wanted like 30 grains of powder for something ridiculous, it'd go there. And then it has 0, and that's not working. It actually does have to be there at 0. You can see here you've got single grains and then tenths of a grain on the top of the little lines. Mine should be set up exactly to 7.5 grains, and it locks in place. If I were to click the back of that, which we're not going to do, then I could move it around and set it to something else, or use that as a real-time measurement to figure out a charge, which I, at this point, have no use for. Not necessarily the fastest way to get a charge out. It is extremely precise. The thing gets down to freaking tenths of a grain. It's really cool. The faster way of doing things is going to be using this guy, which also came as part of my kit. This is the Lee auto disc thing, auto disc powder charging thing, and they call it that because it's a disc. There's a circular disc in there with concentric little different sized holes. Each hole will deliver an exact charge of powder. It's a little less precise than weighing things out, but it's a lot quicker, because basically you fill this full of powder, you replace the top of that with this, and then the round goes in, you know, powder drops, flares, and you keep going. I don't yet have loading data for the exact powder that I'm using for that yet. That's the only reason why it's not being used. Anyway, this has been a real quick reference on reloading, something you guys will all need in zombie preparation, both for the building up of rounds and later once the Z's are at you. Maybe later, in several months, we'll talk about what a reloading kit might look like in the field. Anyway, in the meantime, peace out, and have fun.